I am Pops, and Gord King is going to be with me today to talk about Fury, 2004 film by David Ayer, starring Brad Pitt, John Bernthal, Shia LaBeouf, Michael Pena, and many other great stars. Great performances. Truly a gritty, wonderful film that we can't do justice here. Hopefully, you can go and find a nice long form evaluation, but we have a great conversation ahead for you. Hopefully, you enjoy it. All right, folks, welcome. Gord is in the house. We're going to talk about Fury, the 2004 war film with Brad Pitt, John Bernthal, Shia LaBeouf, Michael Pena, directed by David Ayer. Kind of an underrated, unsung film for some folks. Gord, what do you think, my friend? How you doing? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, I remember when this movie came out. I had some friends that really liked it and really encouraged me hard to check it out myself. I had one friend, he liked it so much, he actually bought it for me on my birthday. He was like, "Yeah, yeah, I think you'd really like this." Um, it was made by the director who did End of Watch at the time. Later ended up doing, a couple of worse movies, unfortunately. But yeah, he did he had I mean this and End of Watch are really pretty fantastic, but fairly bleak films, in regard to their subject matter, but, yeah, I agree. I think this one, it's pretty underrated amongst war films. I think it's really well made. It fleshes out its characters well, and, yeah, it's definitely one that I'm growing to like more and more as I watch it.
I just love that he does a great job in this film, giving us information without having a lot of time spent on it and a lot of
Mhm,
exposition. So we have this opening sequence that we don't totally understand much about, guy on a horse, and then we finally get this shot of Brad Pitt's character leaping from a tank and taking him out. Come to find out, he's obviously a German soldier. He frees the horse, and then he's back inside the tank, and then that's kind
mhm.
of like where the crew is. It's just a lot of information and a lot of things that are happening, and I feel like so much of that type of storytelling sometimes just gets muddled up with people talking and blah blah blah, and it becomes like a 20-minute sequence and those kinds of things. That's a lot that happens in like 4 minutes, and I'm like,
Yeah, the
wow, we got
typical
a lot of information.
Yeah, it feels like the typical approach to a war movie, tends to be something more like Saving Private Ryan, where they might throw you into the middle of maybe a battle scene you're aware of. I mean, like that movie starts you off in D-Day, but pretty much anybody who knows anything about World War II knows D-Day. This one, it's just kind of throwing you in the middle of whatever it is these people are doing at the time, but then it shows him take a guy out, free a horse, and you're like, okay, that's interesting, but it's an actual setup to something that pays off later. Uh, but yeah, like you said, this movie doesn't spend a whole lot of time explaining, the whys and giving you a bunch of exposition or anything like that. It's just this is the scenario and this is what we got to do. Let's get it going. I mean, it kind of just assumes that look, these are soldiers, they have missions they have to carry out. Here's theirs. Go.
And we'll get more information. This is Brad Pitt's character, Wardaddy, and he's the leader of this team, the tank team. And
Mhm.
he rough and tumble, war torn veterans in the thick of war. Have been at it for a while. As the film goes on, we get intricate details. He's been doing tanks since Africa. It's it's a lot of interesting uh, grit and realism that kind of makes you understand that these are people that are sleep deprived, food deprived. They're living in this tank. It's been years. There's like this. I love the fact, Gord, that there's sort of like this almost fake, I don't know, like anticipation of like, oh, the war will be over soon. It's brought up a
Yeah.
couple times, like, yeah, it'll end soon. Like, don't worry about it. Like, just, and then you're kind of like, yeah, but you've probably been saying that for like a year. Or like, how long have you been saying that? Like, it's just a, yeah, but to the new guy, it's like, don't worry about it, kid. You'll be all right. I like that.
Yeah, and it kinda in one other little, piece of information it gives you, right off the beginning is, their gunner has very recently been killed. So they're in mourning, but also one of the interesting thematic elements that develops over the course of the movie is that the tank is that's the homeland. That's the part of the homeland they're defending in a way. Is this is their little slice of America. Uh like I really feel like that starts to build as the film goes on that this is where they live and it's kind of become that's their home turf. You know, I really think the way that's done, and I haven't heard a ton of people talk about it that way, so that might be just something I glean from it, but I found that I find that idea to be kind of interesting as I watch this.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're talking about like territory, and that's an interesting angle because I think one of the cool things that you learn when you if you've family members or someone that's World War II vets, it's a lot about just doing their job, their part, their cog in this wheel, and part of war torn World War II battlefield and themes has to do a lot of with just what your role is and these different things and then losses along the way, which as you said this scene gives us that excruciating detail as they kind of head into town where the local encampment is, and they're given this new guy. He's going to fill the role of their gunner,
Mhm.
and you're kind of learning a little bit about it. And one of his first roles is just to go inside and clean up the mess of where the other guy's remains are, and it's just he makes him puke. And then you kind of get a little brief, sort of, and more into exposition, more information as they kind of get thrown right back out onto the field again. Again, things move rapid in this film, so now we're only talking like 20 minutes. So imagine that's almost a whole film in some movies. Like there's there are movies and they'll spend like an hour on what we just did in 20 minutes. I think this is what makes this film really really superior.
Yeah, and then, right as this movie is kinda getting going, you're learning a little bit about these guys, and uh, they throw in this kid kind of because I mean, it's they don't really tell you why this kid gets pulled to, become their new gunner, likely because it's like, "Look, we can't wait to put these guys, into, into the fire. We've got" it's like, "Whatever the next mission is, we gotta get there soon, so, who's available?" "Well, this kid." "Alright, let's take Norman here and make him the new gunner," and he has absolutely no experience, doesn't know what he's doing, and they're like, "We need a hardened killer," basically, and this kid's the furthest thing from it. Uh, so, yeah, he is definitely being just it's trial by fire. I mean, this kid's gonna learn
He has a
really quickly
he has
just
a quick
how
line about being a typist, right? I know how to type what 60 words a minute, but I've never even
yeah,
been in a tank. Yeah,
yeah,
it's really
he's
fascinating.
he's he hasn't killed anyone, he's probably only fired a gun in basic. That's likely the extent of his experience. Obviously, he's young. This kid's a pretty solid actor. I remember him from 310 to Yuma. He played not Russell, Christian Bale's son. Uh, did a really good job in that. I think he does a really solid job here. But I think his name's Logan Lerman. He's a pretty
Yes.
good actor.
And I think this would be one of the things I think critics would glom onto is the unbelievability that we would just grab some, random kid and throw him in the tank like this. And that's fair. I mean, I'm sure you're in an encampment with all these other people that are obviously more war torn than this kid, so it would be silly to think that this is what would happen. So it's fine. Yeah, I think it's David Ayer's way, and again, you could speak to this if you would. Uh, Kind of putting us in the tank. Like we're learning along with Norman. Norman's now
Mhm.
our excuse to have things explained to him, having a history explained to him, learning about different characters and relationships. Why does this happen? Why does this person behave this way, that way? So it's really sort of like that contrivance, if you will, for that reason.
Yeah, I would tend to agree because it's I mean, you obviously could make the case it's like, look, you could put another soldier in who knows how to handle a gun and you'd almost certainly be much better off. But yeah, like you said, I definitely think that this kid is supposed to represent the audience in this respect. It's like, look, you're coming in green, but you're going to learn quickly that uh their situation is very ugly it's and I think it's a device that works because I don't think most people have thought that much about what it would be like for the guys who drove tanks. We obviously know tanks were used in battle, but we generally speaking in war films don't learn a lot about the people who operated them and what their danger would be like. We probably almost mostly would think of them as among the safer soldiers, because they're in this big piece of armor and we generally speaking, we see those things take so many hits that we were like, "Oh," I mean, we even like, even if you're, a kid in the modern day, it's like when you hear the word tank, you don't even likely think of tanks, you think of, video game characters who can take a lot of damage. We think of tanks as these things that are just like, "Oh, they're more or less fine." So those soldiers, they're probably well off, whereas this movie's like, "No, no, no, they had it pretty rough themselves. They were stuck in these stuck in these confines, having to do some pretty, harrowing things, and they kind of operated like a family unit, and almost different than the foot soldiers is they, like I said, they kind of are in this sort of mobile home, having to defend it at all costs. But yeah, it's an aspect of war that I'd never really given a ton of thought to. I'd never really seen a visual representation of it like this. And I think it's really effective, and I think having this kid there helps the audience a lot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think this is another reason that David Ayer said he kind of chose this story. And there's a few different historical biographies and things like that you can get into. There's real life stories of an actual Wardaddy guy. That was his
Mhm.
nickname that probably inspired naming the character that. I think his name was Lafayette Poole. There are also like tank battles and things in history. The famous Aldi Murphy story, who went into acting later on after his post service time. He had in a tank held off for like an hour, similar to the final scene of this film. So there are those kinds of things that have been drawn upon to make this feel at least as authentic as we can. I think that that's the goal here, and I think it did a good job of again presenting us with something that we weren't used to. Uh,
Mhm.
that I really I kind of likened it to, and I don't know if you how you feel about this film, but The Hurt Locker. I hadn't really seen a film or heard much or thought about much of the guy that's got to go around and diffuse all these bombs and mines and stuff. It's like in the middle of a desert. You have all these things that are buried in the sand. You got to have somebody go around and diffuse them all and stuff. I thought that was another premise that kind of it lended itself to some interest because it was different, right? So
Yeah, yeah, and I think as far as like, job classification in war, I think the Hurt Locker is a good one to compare this to. It obviously, the Hurt Locker goes in a different direction in what it's kind of saying about war, because from what at least I hear from people who, have military experience, the Hurt Locker is a little is less accurate as far as, how soldiers would behave. I think the Hurt Locker is trying to more make a broader statement, by using this kind of job, to highlight something. This one is much more about war itself, even though, yeah, it's not telling a technically true story. This one is definitely a little bit more war centric in its message, or anti-war centric, however you want to take that. But yeah, I
I think
think as
this one
far as
feels. I think the Hurt Locker would feel more anti-war, right? This one feels more like we're not going to quit. Like I mean, I think the thing at the end definitely is that it's Saving Private Ryan trying to we're going to protect this bridge. We're not going to leave. We're all going to die because of this. It's this sort of like blind patriotism in the sense of war and World War II. And it seems like it's acceptable in war context for World War II conflict. We don't see that being an acceptable commentary usually in many other more modern war I don't know plot-centered devices and stuff. Like more of those are more like anti-war and tend to be a little bit more political, or at least have more geopolitical references.
yeah, like because even the phrase like when you hear like movie critics say, this is an anti-war film, it's kind of vague what they mean by that. All because you can almost glum that any war film is anti-war in some respect, but at the same time, it's like I think movie like even Saving Private Ryan, I constantly hear referred to as an anti-war movie, and I'm like I don't think they deny the necessity of the war in that film at all. This film I don't think denies the necessity of war uh, either. The Hurt Locker I think seems more ambiguous in that respect. I think they're more just showing that they're if you're really good at something, you could get very addicted to war.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but
There's a
whereas this
PTSD
is
and cost of war meaning
yeah,
behind that film. This film, I think, similar to Saving Private Ryan and many others, is more of just this is just the horror of war.
yeah. I
I
mean, if
don't
anything,
necessarily.
Hurt Locker is more just it's more just showing the kind of people who fight it. If anything else, like they're
Sure.
like you could argue Jeremy Renner's character is borderline like a psychopath. Uh, But it's like it's I mean, we would look at if we were just to hear about the actions of somebody like Jeremy Renner the Hurtlocker, we'd be like, "Oh, wow, that's a hero right there. Holy cow." But at the same time, if you actually see his actions, you're like, "This guy's crazy. This guy's kinda crazy and almost and kinda needs the war in order to exist."
Yeah.
Whereas,
But
these
I think it wouldn't
guys.
feel that way about these guys if they had been able to go through it, right? Because I think that's where we leave Norman at the end as
Mhm.
having his form of PTSD when the guy says you're a hero. And he's like, I am not a hero. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can see it in his face. And I think we probably had seen that if these guys go home. Like I could see Wardaddy just run upping and just staying in the system. But it's like, you're gonna send the other guy, you're send John Berthol's character back to America to what? Work at Sears? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's
yeah,
go
like,
like this
he'd
dude
be
is crazed. He's like, no, no. So
yeah, I mean, you think of guys like this having to go back home, particularly someone like a John Bernthal, how just you kind of he's one of those characters you would wonder, what was this guy like before it all started?
right.
Was he because you get these little glimpses of humanity from him, but he's gosh, those like probably the first hour of the movie, he's an animal. I mean, you're
Yeah.
like, this guy's messed up.
Yeah.
And I don't think the movie's ever trying to shy away from the fact that he's kind of become this ugly person, but at the same time, it's very sympathetic towards him, which I very much appreciate. But yeah, he's clearly seen and done some pretty horrible things.
Sure.
And you see that, in varying degrees with all of these men, really.
Right.
Uh
Yeah. I wanted to get to
that's
that because
that's
I
one of
think
the
that
fascinating things about it is they have this is there's just these varying degrees of just I guess what we would perceive as ugliness to their characters, but it's mostly just it's a response to the stuff they've seen and done.
yeah, the byproduct of war itself. Sure.
Mhm,
So quickly Norman makes a major mistake by not firing on a tree line. He sees some movement.
mhm.
He sees there's young Nazi youth. Doesn't fire. It involves it results in this explosion. See if I can get to the right here, and they take a tank out. And of course, they fire. Then they make their way into a town. So right off the bat, and there's another scene in a little bit where Norman makes another mistake as well. But I think that what this did well for me, especially early in the film like this, is number one, just the seriousness and the gravitas of everything. Behind every tree is danger. And then
Mhm.
two is like, can you pull the trigger? Like this isn't like, oh, by the way, you're going to war, you're gonna ride around in a tank, and oh, you're not gonna no, you're gonna have to make some horrific decisions.
Yeah.
And here's the cost of when you don't do that properly.
Yeah, you're not in an environment where you get to choose whether or not to shoot because not shooting is just as dangerous as shooting. It's like, except you're getting our people killed now. I mean, he flat out tells him, he goes, "That's your fault." It's like
Yep.
you look at these dead people, goes, "This is your fault because you didn't do your job," basically. And nobody here cares about your inexperience. They're like, "You got to
Yep.
get over that now." And then he ends up pulling him from the tank and, because they've caught this German soldier and he's like, "You're gonna kill this guy. That's
Yeah,
what
we're
you're
gonna,
here to do." And he's here to do the opposite. It's like
yeah,
it's like we're not here for right and wrong. It's like we're here to kill them. They're here to kill us. It's that simple.
yeah. So that's round two of the sequences. Norman still doesn't learn his lesson, basically. So now they're into another conflict where they're advancing in this open
Mhm.
dead man zone. They're moving quickly. Then you have another scene where Norman didn't do what he was supposed to do, didn't fire, and it's like, okay, well, you got to learn a lesson here, and it is one of the ugliest, hardest things to see. Um, but I want to make sure we give it some fair context. So they find this guy now, and I don't know if you know this or not, Gord. He's in an American coat. I don't know what else is. I don't know about the helmet, but I know the coat is American. So
Okay.
if you are caught in conflict like this, wearing the enemy's clothes, your POW Geneva Convention protections don't count. You're disqualified
Really?
from them. Yeah. So if you're pretending to be the enemy, you know what I mean? You're trying to sneak among them. You don't get all these. Hey, listen, fair trial. I surrender. What? No, no. You've betrayed sort of like the quote rules of law. Now, I don't know how much of that's changed between World War II and now. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we're dealing with terrorism and things that are completely changed the landscape of war as we know it over the last 30 years. But in World War II time, if you disguise yourself as a Nazi officer and we snuck into this area to plant a bomb or whatever, and we were caught, there's no recourse for them taking care of us. Likewise, when they caught this guy pretending to be an American, I don't totally remember the framework of the scene, because I think someone else catches this guy and it's used as a reason to teach Norman that he has to pull the trigger. He's got to learn that this is life or death for not just him, everybody around him. So that's kind of the morality behind this scene a little bit for those of you who may not have known that or seen that before. So that's this thing. And I think the helmet is too also an American helmet. It's not a German helmet as well. I'm pretty sure, but I know the code is. So
Interesting. I didn't realize that detail, but yeah, that's a pretty cool detail.
yeah, I think this is also the beauty of the film is it doesn't explain that, and I think this is the nature of films that it's getting away from. Like I think it's more interesting to find a film like this. You like a film like this, and let's say you've watched it 3 times, and now you watch it and you learn a factoid like that, or maybe 2 other factoids, and you're like, oh crap! So now you have deeper appreciation. You learn more that goes into the authenticity, the interesting details that the film and the crew put into their art. I think that many times we would have a conversation about this. GOURD, we'd be like, well, see, no, he doesn't get, I can't kill him. No, you have to. See, he has this American, we go into this commentary about, I don't want the commentary.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's better to let these details be discovered because, uh, and I get that you're not going to know that unless somebody tells you or unless you read about it or whatever. But it's like, do you actually need the information, or is it more fun
Nope,
to learn it along the way? It's like, would these guys say it in a film? Of course they wouldn't. Of course
nope,
they wouldn't. It's like it's like you can maybe try to dream up a scenario where they give that reason why, hey, this guy is masquerading as one of us. I mean, you could probably try if you wanted to, but it's like, but you don't really need to, and that's not the point. The point isn't why he needs to die beyond the fact that he's an enemy of us. You're
yep.
here to kill him. Kill him. It's
Yeah,
like
you're
that's the
here to kill
point. It's
him.
like this
He's
kid
here to
needs to
kill
learn he's
you.
got to pull the
Mhm.
trigger.
100%.
In
100%.
fact, it would almost kind of undermine it would kind of undermine the point in a small way because it's like Brad Pitt's character is like basically telling me it's this black and white. You're here to kill him. You don't need a reason beyond that.
That's
Do it.
correct. Yeah, true, true. So then the film kind of moves into hopelessness phase, where they're going to be sent out onto basically they got to cross this one area that's completely wide open and makes them vulnerable to go into an area so someone else can escape. And then you have quick little shots like this and some others with the fire in the background where uh, just the nature of war around them before you into what is now kind of like one of the biggest I don't know more talked about elements of the film where they start to get into fighting with some of the different folks and the horrors of coming into a town that's been lost and just it's just this is I don't know what it gets kind of like that. It's that awkward pause before we get to another big battle, but it's like this nature of how far will these soldiers go to do bad things themselves, how far will the other people around them, what happens when they show up, because I think we always think of Americans in World War II as they show up and there's like a parade and celebrations and liberation and whatever, and this definitely paints a much darker, realistic uh, depiction that I don't think we want to talk about. You know what I mean? I think it's this one where, because there's a lot of World War II veterans, so they don't talk about the war much. And I'm thinking to myself, after watching this film, I always think to myself, huh, how many of them did something like this? Yeah, okay. All right. I get that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah. Did we get this? Like this, I feel like this is the one of the more, if not the most interesting scene in the movie because this explores a lot. This whole thing that goes on in the hotel.
mhm.
Um, because they've obviously, they've got these. Well, I guess you first come in here and you see these. I almost forget this detail every time. It's that you come in and you see these Nazis who basically drank themselves to death once they knew they were coming, and they all like just killed themselves. But then you've got these people in the hotel, these two ladies, and there's such an interesting like balance of like tension and kind of exploring the humanity of their circumstances and uh there's a lot going on. There's a lot of story here being told with this scene. Like they get a whole lot. Like this is a really good exposition dump in a way, but without doing it like exposition. 'cause this is where you get to learn about, like, why the horse thing mattered. Uh, this tells you a lot about some of the other characters and how kind of broken their humanity is, with the way they treat the woman as opposed to the way Norman treats them. Heck, even as opposed to the way Wardaddy treats them. Uh, I
Yeah,
mean,
because
like,
he
he's
says, "If you don't go in there and bed the woman, I will." Like, if you don't
yeah, it's
do
like
it,
he definitely has that brokenness to him because he's just
yeah,
like, you, because if you don't, I will. Uh,
right,
which there's even a bounce, like, I think Brad Pitt's acting even with that line is really good because there's kind of this odd duality to what he might mean there, because, like,
yeah,
there's part of him that's probably saying that because I mean, he's like, "Hey, yeah, that's a beautiful girl," uh, but at the same time, it's like him taking her is a lot less consensual. That
yeah,
would be in all likelihood a lot less consensual. He was like, "I would just take her." So, I would prefer you it's like, "I would prefer you take her because she kinda likes you." Uh,
yeah. And
but,
you kind of see the quiet implication that he would just be with the other woman because she's a little bit
mhm,
older. This lady,
yeah,
and I just love the fact he wants to sit down. He wants to have some food. He wants to have a little read of the paper. He wants to have a little taste of what normalcy is, if we want to
mhm,
define it that way. And the other men are out just getting their jollies off, basically, and
mhm,
drinking and trying to numb the pain of the war that they're going through. And
yeah.
they kind of take great offense that he has Norman under his wing to put him into the circumstance without them. Like, we weren't invited. Why were we invited? Um, I do like
Yeah,
the
and
fact
and
that,
in a way, like, they're probably like, "What why has Norman earned this?" They're like, "What do it's like, "Wait a minute, he gets to have this nice moment with this girl," and it's an actual nice moment, and
mhm.
it's like, "What why does he get that?" Like, part of me almost wonders if they're like, "What, you're babying this guy? What's going on here?" You know why would you even stop us? If doesn't that kinda you just had this kid kill somebody. You could see, like, a lot of layers and a lot of subtext to this, and I actually think Shia LaBeouf's character, it's really interesting from his angle because he's kind of the one that's not taking part in a lot of that stuff. He's kinda sitting by, he's reading his Bible, he's trying to avoid, fornication and stuff like that, but, even he's kind of ticked off about what's going on.
Yep, yep. Being a teacher, yeah, and I think this is the dynamic of the characters of just being a big muddled mess. It's just a big man. This is war, and I think it's just beautiful. It doesn't have to be some perfect thing of why one character over another. Why? What are War Daddy's motivations all the time? Like, we don't have to be spoon fed everything. It allows for conversation and sort of a sympathy, if you will, for everyone involved. You sort of feel like, why would they be angry? Well, it makes sense why they're angry. Why would they want to do this? Why would they not want to do that? And I think the dynamic of all that coming into play makes this sequence fantastic. And like I said, it kind of lends itself into that. When you hear that veteran talk about what they don't want to talk, they're not wanting to talk about things. You're like, huh, I wonder what they had done. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that to judge them. I'm like, man, this is crazy stuff. Imagine
Mhm.
this type of war for years, years. Like, War Daddy's implied that he's been doing this since Africa, so it's been a minute living in a tank.
Well,
This
and
is
even their
crazy.
attitude towards what he's doing is really
Hmm.
interesting because, like, they're almost kind of mocking, like, "Oh, really? You want this kind of return to normalcy kind of moment for it?" Like, there's just one little part where, uh, like, John Bernthal's character, he licks the plate of the girl, and it really upsets her, and Brad Pitt hands her his plate, and, I'm trying to remember what's the one guy's name, Louis Guzman, is that his name?
Oh, it's Michael Pena.
Michael Pena, that's yeah, sorry. Um he laughs at him when he does it, and it's not something they focus in on, but as he's handing it to her, he just kinda throws his head back and laughs, like, really? Like, he really it's like, who cares what this girl's crying and everything? He's kinda gives them this mocking laugh, and I was like, it's a really good little detail that, uh just kind of throws you into the heads of these various characters. It's like they're mad at him because he would give this to Norman, but at the same time, they're kind of scoffing at the fact that it's like, oh, you want this little moment of normalcy? That's not what we're here for. It's
Yeah, it
really
makes you
interesting
wonder.
watching each individual here.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder if it's, how many times have they just rolled up on towns and not behaved this way, but for some reason this time he wanted to. And again, he kind of alludes to into the war finally. Like, we're running out of territory to fight over. Like, I've gone from this battlefront to this one to this one to this one. Now I'm fighting Germans in Germany. So uh, yeah, yeah, really beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. And then, all right, now let's go out into another impossible situation. By the time he'd shown up to the town, he was in charge of the tanks because he's the senior member. Now it's like, oh, I know, and I think this is a great line here. Of like, yeah, I know who you are, and I know what you can do. I know I'm asking you to do the impossible, but yeah, I need you to do the impossible. It puts him right back into harm's way again to
Yeah.
head right out into this literal open field with a German Tiger, which is just gonna, can take out any tank at any moment, and it's incredible. This sequence is
It's so
I
good.
can't even I can't I'm not I don't even want to spend time on it because I don't want to spoil too much for you guys.
Yeah, it's
Here's the
like if
thing.
you like if
Yeah,
you don't it's like if you're out there and you don't know, how capable a movie could be of showing an intense, kind of terrifying tank battle, watch this sequence. It's
yeah,
you could watch this sequence in isolation and be pretty blown away by it. It's pretty remarkable.
yeah, yeah. So I only want to skip that just because I want to keep that for you guys to have. If you want to talk about like a pleasant surprise or having something to look forward to, let me tell you what, that's it. Uh,
Mhm.
they come out as the only tank on the other side, and the tank hits a landmine, which blows the threads. I don't know what it's called. What's it
But those
they
the treads.
yeah they can't move, and it did it like a wheel drum too. So they have a lot of repairs to do. They're
Mhm.
not going anywhere anytime soon. So
Yeah.
they send Norman out for watch, and they're going to sit there. Now, what I liked about this is they don't rush. They spend their time here for a minute. He's inside. He's looking around before he goes to the tree line. But we spent a few minutes. We end up with a good 5 minutes or so, and for a movie that moves pretty quickly before we get to what the threat's going to be. And I liked all that. I thought this was a really great job. And then so the audience has been given enough information about all the different characters, why you should be attached to them and like them, why you don't want them to die. You also know they're exceedingly capable. And now we've set up a scenario where, yes, they're exceedingly capable, but now the tank can't even move. So now what are they going to do? And I think that is a brilliant way to head into our final act.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is they've obviously they have the option to where they could go away because even he's telling him, he's like, look, you all should take off in this direction. You all will be fine. I'm staying here and defending this. And this is kind of where I think they kind of nail home that idea that this tank is that's their homeland that they're defending. Is because he's like, this is my home. I'm staying here. I'm defending this. Because you almost get the sense that's why he's sticking around. And he's like, I'm not leaving our home behind. This is
Yep.
ours. This is what's kept us going. Uh, I'm gonna defend this thing.
Yep.
And
I've never ran away before. Yeah.
I know there's a scene coming up here where they're going through the houses that John Bernthal is more apologetic towards Norman. We get his scene where he shows his humanity a little bit. Thought that was a really nice moment.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think we
they,
got that right here.
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One really interesting thing about John Bernthal as an actor that I really appreciate is his acting style, and I've seen this with this movie. I've seen it with The Walking Dead, stuff like that. He oftentimes will almost toe the line between great acting and almost being like a caricature of whatever he's playing, and he balances it really well. He manages to balance that really well. Like, you almost feel like, is he going over the top here? But he never quite crosses over to that. He manages to keep it to where you feel like, okay, no, I can believe this is a real character, and he's a really strong and I think underrated actor. He's really good.
And they don't let him. They don't do anything I think crazy with that moment where he basically just looks at him and says, we may not be good men, but you are. Like
Mhm.
there's sort of that's enough. We don't need to cry. We didn't need a story from his childhood or an uncle metaphor or anything like that. It's just enough to
Yeah.
know, even if you're at home and you don't care if this guy perishes in this final sequence. We want to make sure you know that he has a repentant heart. He wants to do good. It's just this he's the byproduct of this mess, and it's gone so far. He can look at someone like Norman, and now you're going to ask yourself, was he a Norman when this all started, and this is what he's become, and this is what Norman will become if enough time, enough war. I think that's what's laid at our feet as an audience member. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, it gives you a lot of subtext, a lot of stuff to think over. You wonder, it's like, did he resent him at first, and now he is more mournful? He's like, "Gosh, I wish I could go back to when I was you." You know, it's like
Yeah,
you could really make a lot of inferences. And granted, it's like we don't know anything for sure, but there's a lot you could glean from him. And like you said, you don't need a lot of words. He knows how to act with his eyes, act with just little expressions and things like that. He's really really good.
indeed, indeed. So then they come up with their scheme, and they kind of like set the table as they're going to be facing hundreds, and it's insane. So they're going to be inside, and you get into just a little bit of bonding time right before then, where they share some stories, and they have the
Mhm.
best job ever line that goes around.
They
There's
give
a
him his nickname. They give him the nickname Machine.
man machine. That's
And
right.
we even I think the part where uh Bible is, he's quoting scripture, and then Wardaddy pipes in and
Gnosis.
manages to do it with him. It's like, wow, there was even a little something that they didn't know about him.
Yeah, he like
Is
knows it,
that
and he knows it's from Isaiah 6, and he's like, and then he quotes scripture back to Bible in a few minutes, and you're like,
Mhm.
wow, this is deep.
Yeah, it's like yeah, and I like that idea. It's like not even they knew that about him. It's like there's a little bit of his past that was probably lost before he became, their leader and whatnot. Because like you said, like he fought in Africa and stuff like that. So he was probably already a hardened vet by the time he got to them.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
for sure. Yeah, and I think that this is it's movies and scenes like this that I think that we lose sight of too, because of the way that he puts his set together, the way he films all of this, and we're in the tank with them. And as a veteran himself, David Ayer kind of knows how to convey this, I think, really well. And that's why him doing, superficial projects in hindsight, Suicide Squad might have sounded like a good idea. And maybe there is a different version out there that we would all love. But in hindsight, I'm like, I really like he's so much better when he's grounded it into, the real horrors of life. Is like this is the stereotypical toxic male who has literal grenades hanging on the wall behind him in the tank. You know what I mean? We have people in our society that wouldn't even pick up an arm and try to protect themselves. So it's just so beautifully captured, I think, in so many ways.
mhm, I agree.
Yeah, a little bit of bonding before they're going to get close, and they just kind of walk. They're kind of surrounding the tank. They don't quite know what's going on. Then when they open fire on, I think it's the only Jeep, but there may have been more than one. But they end up taking out their one vehicle, and then we won't be able to share a whole lot with you here because it's so dark because we're there, we're in the battle. So this is what you get. They lay down little smoke bombs, and they're literally taking on, I think I want to say like 200 troops, 200 troops. So it's
Yeah,
just
it's yeah, I think it's
them,
2 to 300. It's quite a group. It's like a whole battalion, I think, isn't it?
yeah, of SS soldiers. So not just regular
Mhm.
infantrymen, it's SS people. So these are really high trained Germans. They scatter into that little barn house, which of course they fire on that with the tank, and so it becomes this impossible scenario of how long can you keep going with the limited ammo, and they end up having to figure out a way to get ammo on the outside. Um, just completely crazy, insane scenarios that are put there for you to kind of work through. I don't know what is your thoughts or sort of impression of just how this scene plays out.
Yeah, I mean, because as they're being, approached and surrounded, you're like, okay, this is a hopeless situation. Just about, you're wondering, it's like, is it possible even any of them are getting out there? Uh, and the way the movie's played out, it would feel like kind of a betrayal if if people like swooped in and saved the day for them. It's like that. You kind of know that's not gonna happen. They're on their own. They've said as much, and no one's coming to rescue them. So you figure most or all of them are not gonna make it, but they're gonna keep fighting. They're gonna defend. So this is kind of uh that's just one of those situations where you're like, all right, you're rooting for them and you don't want any of them to die. But they are almost certainly not going to make it. But you're just every time they pop one, you're there's that little glimmer of hope, like, oh, maybe, but It's
Right.
just they'll pop 3 people and, there'll be 10 more behind them, and they do one by one, they get picked off, and it hurts every time. It
And
it
and
it does
they
hurt
hurt
every time.
every time, right? Because they have moments where they're like, they wanna pause and mourn or react, and they don't have time to.
Yeah,
There's so much going on that you as an audience member in the middle of this battle with them, you don't even get a chance because the characters don't. So
yeah,
you're not allowed to have an emotional response because they're not allowed to have an emotional response.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're stuck in this situation where it's like you don't have hardly any time to breathe. It's like you're watching. Their losses are just like small percentage points every time you take one. It's like you could take down one and there's 10 behind them. It doesn't really matter that much. Each time they take a loss, it's huge.
Yeah.
And it's bringing them that much closer to where it's over. But yeah, they valiantly, defend this place, but it gets increasingly more desperate because they are just so overwhelmed.
Yep, they're
But
out of ammo. They're overwhelmed. Wardaddy has one last moment to save Norman. Tell him to go out the hole in the bottom. So going to escape hatch out the bottom, and that's what he goes out of and hides. And then he's quickly found. And I will admit, there's a quick shot of the German seeing him but letting him live. Right,
yeah, and I
right
I
here.
think I get yeah, and I think I get the point that they're going for, because I think this is probably one of those moments that I would venture a guess some people wouldn't care for because of the way we
Yeah, I don't.
typically characterize Nazi soldiers as just being these inhuman monsters. I, generally speaking, prefer depictions like this to where it's like, "Look, okay, we nobody needs to tell anybody what they did and how awful it was, but they were human beings. You're not you really shouldn't forget that." And David Ayer specifically chose a young person to play that particular soldier, and you almost get the sense he would be the German Norman, to where
I know that's what he's going for, and the only reason
yeah,
I push back on that and agree with I'm in the dislike camp is because they said they were SS soldiers. So I
right,
know
right. It's
and
and
I know that's a detail.
that's where I would have
Yeah,
contention with it also
yeah,
is
that's
they've built up, because the movie has built up the idea of just how bad the SS are, that they have a
right.
particular
Yeah,
hatred for the SS.
yeah, and historically that's it. That's what makes it.
Sure.
The SS are different than the regular German infantry. So the fact that there would be a Norman that's there and then a Norman that would give him sympathy was a little hard. And this is where I thought
Yeah.
so when the very first time I saw the film in theaters, and this is what happened. This is where I thought there was going to be like a plane. The planes were going to fly. Because remember how they had the shot earlier where the planes fly over and they're like, "Go get them, boys," or something. It's a quick little shot, right? And it's kind of meaningless in the hindsight, or they just kind of giving you there's this war going on around them. I thought that's what was going to happen. It's like, oh wait, those guys that were flying in that one scene an hour ago, yeah, they're actually doing stuff too, and they don't have to blow them up. It's just the fact that they by dropping bombs and it creates enough chaos that Norman could get a round off or something and save him. I don't know. That's what I was kind of going for in my head, but this is a small dislike. I mean, I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but yeah, I come down on the side of more negative than positive. But listen, we got to have
I do
Norman
too,
live, so we
because
got
like I
someone
said,
to tell the yeah, we have to have someone to tell the tale. So hence the reason Norman has to live. So
yeah, and I agree. I do see it as more of a negative than a positive for the reason you brought up, that it's an SS soldier. I mean, shoot, it's even on his helmet. You can see it right there.
yeah,
Um, it's like I get what he was going for. I don't even necessarily have a problem with what he was going for, but it's like, well, then you shouldn't have made him SS, because you've
yep,
built that up, and it's like they were different. It's like that was a different bunch. So you kind of put yourself in a situation where you wanted to have your cake and eat it. It's like, I really want them to go up against SS soldiers because they've built that up as an enemy, but I also want this moment. It's like, you either need to not make them SS and have the moment, or you need to make them SS and not have this moment, because it's one of those details. Like, you can sacrifice either of those details and you don't have the flaw.
yep,
And I don't
yep.
think you have to have
Well, the
those
SS was
details match
important
up.
for the hopelessness factor, right? If there's regular German infantry, you'd create an easier chance to survive because you would be able to mow them down faster. You'd be able to create more chaos faster. SS are more trained, advanced, maybe less likely to panic, those kinds of things. But that means he'd also be less likely to let Norman live. But
Hmm.
anyway, Norman survives some morning, and then you have the quick little shot at the end of you are the hero, and it kind of goes to credits, and it's just a breathtaking thing. I didn't want to do a major, first of all, I wasn't able to do with GOURD some, 3-hour dive deep scene by scene breakdown. We'll save that for the MMM shows and others that can do that. I wanted to do more of it. Let's just revisit it and promote something 20 years later, because it's been 20 years, man. 20 years already for this film. That was a hard thing
Has it
for
been
me to get my.
20? I thought it was 10.
I thought it was 2004. Is it 2014? Oh, it's 2014. You're right. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
Sorry.
I don't think it's
I
been
have
that long.
I
Oh
have
no.
another film. I have another film I wrote down today. That's 2004. So that's why I had that in my head. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're
Ah.
right. 10 years. So 10 years
And then
already.
tonight we're covering one that's 30.
I know, The Crow. So we're
Mhm.
recording this on the night that we're doing MMM The Crow. But by the time you
Yeah.
guys see that, you'll have to see that. Check that out for yourselves, The Crow.
Mhm.
But so overall, my friend, how do you kind of rank this for you on your rewatchability?
Yeah, this is one where, like I said, I saw it around the time my friend gave it to me, which was probably, close to 2020-ish. Maybe it was a little bit before that, probably 2018, 2019. I really liked it then. Uh, I really enjoyed it on rewatch. I think it's definitely a rewatchable war film. It's not quite as rewatchable as some of the more, like, I guess, hopeful war films, because this is a very bleak one. And if you're squeamish about war violence, this one definitely has a good amount of that. Uh Also has some pretty harrowing stuff, a lot of sad moments and stuff. But for a movie that in tone is as sad as it is and as grim as it is, I still do think it's very rewatchable overall. I'm not sure yet if I would rate it as a great movie, and if anyone knows my scoring system, 8. Between 8 and 10 is where I start getting into great territory. But this is at minimum very, very close to that. I would say at the moment I would probably rate it about a 7.5 out of 10 at least.
Okay.
But I might rate it higher over time as I kind of, you know, I guess pick it apart, the more I watch it and the more I, like, think
Okay.
about the script and whatnot. But yeah, at the
All
moment,
right.
I
I
would
mean,
probably say it's at least a 7.5 out of 10, at
that's
least.
true because it's only been 10 years, so I guess it is fair.
Mhm.
Because I'm going to sit on the higher end of that. I would sit at least a 4 for me, and then my rewatchability is still really high because I've watched this twice now. So because we had a delay in our schedules, and
Mhm.
I got a chance to watch it again, I'm like, no, I'm still. So I'm still solid at an 8. 4 out of 5, and I don't see it as a 9. I don't see it as a 10. I don't. My score's not moving down, so I feel pretty comfortable. And I think for me, it's sitting more at a 4, even more so, 4 out of 5, because critics hated this movie for some sort of like weird contrived historical accuracy argument, and I
Ugh.
don't, to this day I'm still not quite sure what it is. I mean, are they trying to just get into semantics about the tiger tank and how it just, they don't line them up, they don't do that? Okay, fine. I mean, that's true, but that's a small detail in the grand scheme of a film like this. Like, that's, I mean, yes, it's a great battle scene, it's a huge battle sequence, but that's a silly thing to kind of hang around the neck of a film like this. I felt
Especially
like
especially a film that's not claiming historical accuracy, and
it
that's
wasn't
that's
based on a
always my
book or anything
stand.
like that, right? It's more
Yeah, I
like
mean,
it's his original script based on his inspirations. It wasn't like he said, "I'm adapting this tank driver story" or anything.
yeah, to me, like, the historical accuracy critique of a film should only matter if a movie is claiming historical accuracy. I otherwise do not care about historical accuracy. I'm like, as long it's if you're telling a film, I prefer it's like be internally consistent. I think that's far more important. But unless your movie is claiming to be historically accurate, I don't think it's a valid criticism to bring up the historicity. Because I mean, there's plenty of war films and other such movies that, like, Inglorious Bastards isn't historically accurate, but it's not claiming to be. It's claiming to be revisionist. It knows
Yeah, I
what
was
it
gonna
is.
say that's a Tarantino verse film. That's not even meant to be
Exactly.
historically.
Exactly.
That's literally a Tarantino verse. That's literally Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They're literally
Yeah.
like the alternate universe of what if this had happened kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
so for me, that was another reason why I guess I'm being honest with my own bias that I'm a little more defensive of this film than maybe I even should be with my being staunch on my 8, on my 4 out of 5, because I feel like some of the criticisms of this film were so unwarranted in that it's such a great depiction of something that isn't done well, right? The horrors of war, but also like your heart's broken. I mean, literally, these are characters because you have every version of them, right? Especially like you said, Bible's character who's um, is literally like a good man who's teeter on the edge of, because he's having to do horrific things in order to live out his duty in this war, and yet he's trying to uh, stay aligned to his beliefs and his commitments. And I think that Norman and Ward. I mean, I don't know what's the negative of characters in this movie would be maybe outside of the core tank team. I don't know that I care about any of the other characters in this film. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's characters, other soldiers, there's whatever. It's, you know, you don't really get okay. But I don't. Why do you need to? You got 5 or 6 people that you do care about. Why do you? It's so the criticisms of film sometimes makes my head hurt, brother. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find criticisms like that, they annoy the crap out of me. I get
Yeah.
really annoyed with stuff like that. I don't think much about what critics say other than if I'm going to poke fun at them in videos and whatnot. But yeah, it's movies like Fury definitely didn't deserve some of the criticism they got. It is a objectively it is a really really good movie, bordering on a great movie. You know, maybe even a great movie. Historical accuracy, it's like it's not claiming that it's not claiming to be based on anything. It's like it's taking the framework of war and World War II. That's the backdrop,
Yeah.
and it's telling its story that way. And it's a really really good one. It's a really really good
Yeah,
one, and I
it
highly
doesn't
recommend it to people.
yeah, because it doesn't lend itself to being like I think even in my top 10 war movies, because I think there's so many good war movies.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that it still can't be like literally that's what I'm saying. Like I'm not even sure it makes my top 10, and I would still rank this as an 8, as a 4 out of 5. That's how many good war movies there actually are to see, and
Oh yeah.
that's because rewatchability. War
Mhm.
movies, especially historical war movies, things of that nature, and the performances, and it brings out so much authenticity. And I don't think some people think about how many war movies there are. There's so many.
Oh
So,
yeah.
but folks, yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. If you've never seen it or haven't seen it in a while, what your thoughts are of a certain performance. I know we touched on Brad Pitt and John Bernthal in particular, as well as is Logan Lerman. Is how you say his name? Logan Lerman. I think how you say
Yeah, Logan
Lerman.
Lerman. Yeah.
Yeah. Michael Pena, Shia LaBeouf. I mean, I don't have any bones to pick of any significance. I mean, I guess you could argue with the tiger sequence that, yeah, I wish it had been this way or that way. Okay, fine, but that would have meant Wardaddy's not in charge. That was kind of a premise that was important. So
Hmm.
you had some elements there that you kind of had to work through. That I think David Ayer did a great job of conveying, and I can't thank you enough for doing that. Any final thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, like to me, it's like the only criticism I could see that like maybe the movie's being like there's some things where I'm like, yeah, you could argue they're being a little on the nose with uh like the sequence at the hotel after they've had all that stuff happen, then it gets blown up and the girl dies and whatnot. It's like you could argue that's being a little on the nose with the
Oh,
grimness
right.
of war. Like,
The
that's wow.
timeliness of it, right? The idea that it would happen at that exact moment and not an
Yeah,
hour
it's like you
before or
could.
not 2 weeks later, right? Good point.
Right. It's like I could see that as a valid criticism. The one we brought up at the end, I do think that's a valid criticism. But outside of those, I think this is a really strong, solid, relatively simple to follow war movie. It's not over long. It's very rewatchable. Yeah, I think this one definitely should be seen by anybody who enjoys war films. It's
Yeah,
highly
I
recommended.
can't wait to hear from you guys out there. What your guys' thoughts, and hopefully this. So some of you guys haven't had this in the rounds on your shows. Maybe some folks that are in our YouTubing community could feature a film like this and get even more into the depths, or even to more to just scene dissections. I think there's a lot of room for that as well. So everything is in the description to check out GOURD. If you're not checking out GOURD, you're missing out because GOURD does his own thing. Then he does memeing. He's got all sorts of fun stuff to do. So make sure you're checking
Yeah.
out GOURD. Brother, it's great to have you with me doing this. It's been fun, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I always have a good time doing stuff like this, and I'm glad we got to do this one.
Yeah, it's a good one. So we'll have to find out something. Maybe we have GOURD back again. It'd be great. I'd love to have him on in a couple weeks. Maybe we'll do another anniversary. There's so many anniversary films I haven't been able to get to. It's already August. I'm like, oh crap, the clock is running. We got to give some nods to stuff and celebrate. So folks, make sure you check out the description for some of those links, and appreciate your time. Be blessed. Talk hard. Till next time. I'm Pops.